Well, I'm here at Marketing Pros B2B Forum, and I have the honor of talking to Doug. And you were the CMO of Skype, correct?
I was, absolutely. I was CMO of Skype since it got spun out of eBay and when we got acquired by Microsoft.
And
So,
that's a
so
big company, right? I mean,
uh,
everyone in the world knows who Skype is.
yeah, so we used to have this statement that we added a city the size of Tokyo to the user base every 21 days. I
Wow.
mean, when you just think about that, it's incredible. Sometimes I love being in the States, I love being here, but there are so many people out in the world doing interesting things on mobile devices, on their computers. So to be part of that ecosystem, to have hundreds of millions of active users. And I think the other stat that's amazing to me is when I was there, we carried around 25% of all of the international traffic in the world. Again, much bigger than any other
Yeah.
telco provider, all that. So our vision was to break down barriers to communications. And when you're a marketeer, to do that kind of stuff, to have that kind of mission, just fantastic.
I mean, I imagine like when I was back, 10 years ago, and we'd be saying, what's the rate to call the UK? I've never dialed internationally. It's like, just go on Skype and do it. And it was like, you just see that, like that moment of realizing like, this is really going to change the world. And now hearing everybody like trying to shuffle to build their own messenger platform and all this stuff. And it's like, you guys have been in it forever.
Yeah, I know. It's, back in the day, it was Kazaa, if you remember that file sharing. Super clever use of.
I still remember my ICQ number. That's how long I've been on the internet.
Okay, we'll show our age now, won't we?
Yeah.
Bulletin boards and all that. But it was really smart move away from file sharing to something that was actually useful for people. And then obviously video. I mean, we did a lot of work, a lot of research on showing what the difference if you actually have a video relationship versus just talking on the phone. And that's kind of the other, whether you're talking, I'm sure like most people who use Skype, they use it to talk to their grandmother, show their kids, that kind of thing, but also from a business context. So it was really interesting, different segments and changing the way that people communicate. Yeah.
And then after Skype, you left, right? And then you went to a tiny little company, correct?
Well, so that's right. So we got bought by Microsoft, as you know, and they've continued to reinvent the product, and that's interesting. But when I was with Skype, I was in Luxembourg. That's where Skype was headquartered. But I've been in San Francisco for a long time. So I came back to San Francisco. And long in the dim and distant past, in the late 90s, I've been involved in leading McKinsey's CRM practice. And I'd seen Salesforce when it was like this tiny little company. I remember going to one of their first user conferences, which is a fraction of the size of this. And just thinking, the cloud and how that's going to transform B2B software. So it was exciting. I knew a couple of the senior leaders over there. So I gave them a call and said, love to get involved. And I joined Salesforce, ended up taking the CMO role at Salesforce, and that was quite a ride.
Okay, so Salesforce, I mean, they have one of the largest events in the industry, right? They are dominant in the CRM space. What was it like to be CMO at Salesforce, like that level of intensity?
So somebody once described it to me when I took over the role, a former CMO. So as you may know, Salesforce has had many CMOs. But they said to me, it's interesting because you can have companies that build their whole marketing strategy around your event, around Dreamforce. So there's a big responsibility to get that right. And then we did the Salesforce roadshow, which was kind of doing similar kinds of events all over the world. And Salesforce, as you rightly say, is a big events company. So, you learn a lot through doing that, and it's fun and it's crazy. But also on top of that, right, my number one job was to run demand gen, right, to build the processes, the programs, to use, Salesforce for sales and other tools for marketing. So, it's a very, very, like many CMO jobs, an incredibly broad role, whether it's dealing with PR, AR, events, demand gen. So it's challenging, it's high stress in an environment where you have a CEO, Mark Benioff, who's a fantastic marketeer. So also has his own ideas about how things are done. So very exciting place to be.
Your CMO just handed you a global campaign with a short deadline and the request to lead with video. You're given a team of you and, well, you. This campaign is asking for 15 videos that need to create awareness and engagement across multiple online destinations, drive demand and lead gen, and measure performance. Whew, calm down. Everything's gonna be okay. We've got you covered. First things first, we're gonna set you up with Video Marketing Suite, which will allow you to access everything you need from a single online location. And it's made for marketers, so you can easily run your campaign yourself. With just a couple of clicks, your videos are uploaded, automatically optimized to work across all screens and devices. You can distribute to your social channels to reach audiences where they are, and then drive them back to a customized branded video portal using Gallery, which you can create quickly, easily, and in multiple languages. For live events, Brightcove offers an easy-to-use live streaming interface, and after you're done streaming, trim the video and post it on demand for people who missed the event. We'll even help you create interactive elements to optimize video for lead generation. To make sense of all this, our analytics platform tracks a number of statistics in an easy-to-use UI. This data feeds into leading marketing automation platforms. You can see who watched and for how long, and what other content they consumed. Then you know what to create and who it's for. We're Brightcove. We'll help ensure that your video marketing is a success.
And then you made the conversion, right? You moved out of Salesforce and then went to Leadspace, right?
Absolutely. So CEO of Leadspace. So, basically, at Salesforce as CMO, as I said, running demand gen and things, it became very clear to me that the transformation that had happened to B2C marketeers and using big data and analytics and programmatic ad buying and all that kind of stuff, that was going to happen to B2B marketeers. And it's a much more, we can talk about why it's different, more complicated process. And so when I had the opportunity to join Leadspace, which is a leader in predictive analytics and data management for B2B marketing, I was like, this is a chance to build something that's going to be the sort of next generation of how people think about engaging their customers. And so that for me was an obvious jump. Plus also, it's my first time taking on a CEO role. And in that situation, being able to sell and engage with marketeers, an audience I know really well, it was a really good sort of combination of a space I knew, a product I believed in, and also an audience I could engage with.
And I love that transition. I think it makes sense to have the CEO come from a place of understanding the customer, not just understanding the buying habits of a customer or understanding the technology stack, but understanding the customer. And I think as we start to see CMOs take more of a seat at the table and have a real voice into the company, you'll start to see more of that transition, that people will roll out of that CMO role into the CEO. Do you have a feeling that people are kind of or companies are leading down that path?
Absolutely, right? So, so when I took my first job as a marketing person, a brand manager, I did it because back in the, I'll date myself now, 90s, so many CEOs were marketing people. But then we went through this time in the 2000s when all of a sudden product became king. A little bit actually like we talked about before the show. And so then it was Mark Zuckerberg and it was, people who could build great technology, right? And that was cool for a while when technology was hard to build. But now with Amazon Web Services and an API for everything and tools like Leadspace that can find your customers for you, all of a sudden, it starts to become, do I know my audience? Do I know my buyer? Am I able to develop a product that fits a need, a user need, not just can I build a good product? Because it's easy to build good products these days. And so all of a sudden, marketing comes back to be, I believe, the most important discipline, or at least one of the most important. And so in that situation, we're back, I think, in the heyday of marketeers. We're back in that time, really like it was in the 90s, when all of a sudden, as you say, understanding your audience, figuring out what they want, and then building a product to meet those needs and building a business around that. That's what great companies are about.
So what have been some of the challenges that you've seen kind of rolling into that new position? Because there's a lot more on the plate, but still you are so integral to the whole organization and the customers too.
So, I mean, there's lots of interesting challenges making the transition from a marketer to being a CEO. First and foremost, I'd highlight, is all of a sudden you're measured by a different kind of set of metrics, and it's all about P&L management. At the end of the day, as a CEO, you got to keep, especially as a growing entrepreneur company, it's about keeping cash in the bank, building a business, keeping your customers and your investors happy. And so it was important for me, and actually I would encourage anyone who's looking to make that transition to really think about how do you get P&L management experience, which typically is not a skill that marketeers have. They sometimes like to believe that they have it because they manage big budgets, but it's a little bit different as you start to think about financial accounting and all that kind of stuff. And this is where, for example, having an MBA helps. Secondarily, marketeers as a kind of person, in a Myers-Briggs type, they're often E's and they're often N's, and they're kind of full of energy and they're dynamic and they want to do stuff. It can be bad and it can be good. When you're managing a organization where it's a much bigger group and you've got people in finance and engineers and all that kind of stuff, you need to be able to manage a much broader set of people and figure out how you can engage and inspire and interact with them. And some of the things we bring to the table as marketeers is good for that, like to be able to set a vision and a direction. And some of the things are bad, like sometimes we just live in the clouds, and a lot of people want to live in like, okay, but today, this is what I can do. So there's things like that have been an interesting transition.
Yeah, it's amazing when you start to have a team and you look at your team and you're so, like as a CMO, you're so encouraged to go interact with the customer, and you're just like, come on everybody, and you realize that they're sitting still and they're like, no, we're here. We want to build our own culture. We want to kind of develop our own processes. And as a CEO, you've got to stop and say, that is a new thing I've got to look at, right?
Yeah, and what's right for the company, and that may be very different. We have our data scientists and engineers in Israel, right? It allows us to build a great product and all that kind of stuff. And our head office is in San Francisco. So then you get into, exactly what's the culture between those two organizations? You've got very different kinds of people doing different kinds of work in two places. How do I build that into one cohesive group of people? So these are kinds of, this term culture, is one of those things that is always sort of an intellectual curiosity until you actually start to see, hey, hang on a minute, how am I going to bring this together? So, for example, at Leadspace, we have been doing work around thinking about what kind of organization we want to build, what kind of culture we want to build, so that as we grow, we're 80 people today, we sort of double every year or two. So, as we continue to grow and we build a large-scale organization, that we can set a good foundation. That's exciting, right? Whenever I hire people, I'm like, you know what? You can come and set what we're going to look like when we're 500 people or 10,000 like Salesforce. It's fun to be at the ground level, but it's also challenging.
Absolutely, and especially like you discussed with that P&L and cash in the bank, and knowing how cash flow works for the organization, knowing how your contracts work. There's so much data out there as the CEO that you've really got to take some time back and to invest in your network of other business leaders. So what are some things that you wish a friend would have taken you aside and said, hey, let me tell you, when you do that, always, go with this approach or think about these things that you just didn't have before you started?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Somebody gave me a book when I started. I don't know who it was. And it said there's only 3 things a CEO needs to do. They need to set a clear vision for the company, hire great people, and make sure you've always got cash in the bank. And I think that's very true, actually. I thought it was quite good advice. That being said, the speed of change is really quite dramatic. And it's one of the things that's always been interesting for me to learn in terms of, how do you build a team that can grow and scale and have the best of what you need today, but can also grow to being 2 or 3 times the size. That's an interesting challenge for everyone as an organization. How do you set the organization and invest correctly between how much do I spend my time building engineering resources, how much do I spend my time on sales and marketing? Have I got that balance right? How do I actually just think more generally about what's the right rate of growth? Everyone thinks we should grow as fast as we can, but you've also got to keep customers happy, and make sure that you're actually developing a product that has long-term potential. So all of these things are complicated. I'm not sure it's necessarily things that are brand new to think about, but definitely some of the tips and tricks to how to do it well is very interesting. I'm actually a member of something called Vistage Group. I don't know if you know
Oh, yeah.
Vistage. They're also a customer of Leadspace, which is great. But what they're doing is bringing CEOs together to help share some of these things and almost be that self-help group. And it's very true that as a CEO, you really don't have anyone to talk to. And having that kind of support network is something that I discovered later on.
Exactly. And I love like in the Vistage group and other, executive groups like that they have like the no sales policy or, it's like we're here together. We're like a board, but we don't actually pressure you. All these things it's an accountability. It's the ability to step back and say, man, this is keeping me up at night. Who's dealt with this?
Right.
And it's you both engage and then you gain from it. And they're amazing to have that, if you find yourself growing, too fast, then you need to have some people you can rely on to tell you what are those key metrics that you can look for.
That's right. And then, I think, so there's some very rational decision making, but a lot of it's the emotional support. A lot of it's the, how do I think through this issue? And what's amazing to me, it's interesting. One of the values that we have as a company is transparency. And if you go into Vistage, what's amazing, now we're talking a lot about Vistage, but how you can get a set of CEOs together who are very open about what they do and sharing ideas to help you do a better job. Ideally, what a good board is like as well. So, it's been an important part of our, continued growth and success. And if I was new to the role, I'd be encouraging people to find whatever it is that works for them, those kind of support networks too.
Yeah, and I think as marketers too, we can form our own groups, right? And CMOs, there are other councils that are out there, but you've really got to find other trusted people that are at different stages, smaller companies and bigger companies, and then the same size. So that way you can know where you came from, especially if you come into an organization that's already grown, right? There's different steps that you take in that early days, different glass ceilings that a company will break through. And things that you have to learn when you go through it. And if you're not there the whole time, you might not see the baggage along with those. And so, but from a CMO's perspective or a CEO perspective, just reach out and build some sort of network.
Absolutely. I mean, go back to Dreamforce where we started this. Dreamforce is a community event. Yes, you go for some of the big parties and U2 and all that. But a lot of it's the sessions to learn from other people. And even more important than that is the get-togethers where you're just with your peers or an event like, this one, the B2B Marketing Forum. So these, I think, we sometimes forget that those soft, fluffy interactions where we just sit down in a bar, we're chatting to our mates about how we do things, is important, right? We have the same, as a company as well, right? So I have a customer advisory board. It's very important, actually, with the likes of Microsoft and Bloomreach and RingCentral, helping us figure out what our vision is, right? Not just drinking our own Kool-Aid, but making sure we get the customer's input. And that's incredibly helpful for us too. So as you say, seeking out what those opportunities are to, connect the dots. And especially in marketing, because marketing is such a diverse discipline. It's changing so fast that, the number one thing we hear when we talk to our customers and just generally the marketing ecosystem is, how do I keep up with all this technology? How do I figure out, and marketers sometimes have shiny object syndrome. They always want the coolest, latest thing. So how do you choose, I'm going to invest in this or in that? And that really comes down to good references, talking to people you trust in the ecosystem, and then making a few choices that you really think can make a difference. And so I think as a marketer, that's always the thing. How do you make the right choices? How do you figure out the right information? And then making sure you see results from what you do. Nothing else matters more.
Today, real time is the only time that counts. To stay relevant, you have to stay ahead. Your customers want the right information, right now, wherever they are. So how do you meet the demands of today's customers? By marketing in context. Context accounts for a customer's interaction with your brand. So each touch builds on the next, creating more meaningful experiences for your customers. At Sitecore, we call this context marketing. To do it well, you need marketing technology that has three things: contextual intelligence, content management, and omni-channel automation. Contextual intelligence gives you the information you need about your consumers, so the content you manage is more relevant and is automatically delivered wherever your customers are. The Sitecore Experience platform was built for context marketing, so you can create a more personalized customer experience. Demand more from your marketing technology. Demand more from marketing. Own the experience. Sitecore.
So I know you're not supposed to talk about the company and, at content marketing events like this, but I really want to know, what does Leadspace do? Because as a marketer, we are being tasked with finding more leads than ever, right?
Yep.
We are really it's like sales kind of throw up their hands and marketing got the ball thrown to them, and it's a hot potato, and now we got to figure out how we can handle it. So how does your solution help both the sales team and the marketing team really find those leads?
Yeah, and that's exactly what everyone has. You can also frame it as marketing has accountability now to sales, and marketers are always happy when sales guys are happy. And that's an opportunity, actually, but it does require a few things, right? First is, sales by almost their nature is quite subjective. So how do we bring more data? How do we bring more real information into the discussion? It can be quite subjective in terms of having a view, a feeling about what to do. So how do we bring more analytics in terms of doing that? And then how do we scale it? So I sometimes describe what Leadspace does is just what a good salesperson does, but we do it at scale. So what does that mean? If you look at a good salesperson, I go and I search around anywhere I can. I can find somebody who I want to engage with, an account or an individual, and then going to go and Google that person. I'm then going to go and look in all the databases. I'm going to look about whether I've had any interactions with them. So I'm collecting a whole lot of data. We have what we call a virtual data management platform that collects all of that data and a ton more and brings it together into usable data, if you will, signals. Then secondarily, what does the sales guy do? He then goes, okay, looking at a bit of this and a bit of that, tries to piece it all together and figure out, is this a good prospect? And what should I do to them? Well, again, that's what really the promise of predictive analytics is to build models to do that, like based on past experience and other things, to figure out, should I engage with this and how should I engage with them? And then what would be the most relevant thing to do to this person? And then, unlike a salesperson who can get through maybe 10 leads a day, we can get through thousands of leads an hour when you're working with really large companies, right? Like some of the ones we talked about, like a Oracle or a Microsoft, they've got thousands and thousands of leads. So we are automating, really being, if you will, the AI for B2B marketing that allows marketeers to engage in a similar process what a good sales guy would do, and bring then the right intelligence and the right leads to the sales guys so they can have better closing. And it's a really, really powerful tool, and the whole process, it's needed. And then the final piece that's really magic about this is you can then sit down with a marketing guy and the sales guy, and you can both agree, okay, let's look at this data, let's look at these models, let's understand what they're telling us and align around that, so that no longer do you get into well, I thought this was an MQL, and you didn't think this was an MQL. Well, how do we decide it was an MQL? Well, and then you get into these endless debates, which can be very negative, especially if there's challenges in the business.
And the draw for who's close, one person handing off the deal to them and then interacting, but then marketing still being engaged with the customer. And there's always a time period where it's like there needs to be more communication, but everybody feels they can't communicate because they're too busy doing the work. So we do need bots, right? We do need systems that can collect that data, that can tell us, platforms and size and real data, not just like stuff that somebody sold somebody else, in the back of their car or something.
It's, look, and I'm a great believer, having been in CRM and marketing for a long time, that this is also not a one-shot thing, right? All CRM is about testing and learning and getting better. So I'm a big proponent of, I agree, absolutely, everyone's too busy. So let's make incremental improvements. If I can bring to the table for our customers a set of people and companies that convert 50% better, right? They don't have to be perfect. That's going to save everyone a lot of time. If I can bring to the table better lead to account matching or underlying data that is 72% better than what they had before, is it perfect? No. Does it mean that you're going to get more of the right leads and do better? And then we can tweak it, then we can improve it. And so that view of how do we test and learn and improve over time and demonstrate results is the only way that marketing succeeds. When you come up and you say, I've got this brilliant, all singing, all dancing solution, which is always very sexy, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really fit needs. So how do we do that? How do we improve over time? And then how do we get everyone to align about what we're doing? These are classic challenges.
Absolutely. And then once you find something, guess what? That's going to be disrupted too. So you have to keep measuring and to see that once it went up, then when it starts going down, why is it going down? What's shifting in the market? And those are people, they need to think of these processes as being alive and being active, just like their customers are.
And we think of that as feedback loops, right? So in our Salesforce application where SDRs can live and they can prospect and find using all the sources that we have, really high quality prospects, we have what we call Pandora for leads, a little thumbs up, thumbs down. So as they bring good leads or bad leads or they find people, you can actually feed back into the modeling process very quickly, that information. We even look at how people are interacting with the app. This is the power of applications and integration of software and analytics together that help you improve those models, right? So in B2B where, people have sales cycles that could be anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. If you just wait for a deal to close to figure out what happened or just use your traditional data, it typically doesn't give you the insights that you need. So you're constantly looking for other insights that you can bring to the table to make that modeling better. And I think this is the exciting thing. And I think, if you looked at this year's Dreamforce and Einstein and what Salesforce was talking about, it was really talking about how these kinds of AI tools will transform sales mostly, because that's where Salesforce plays. And I think what we're also seeing is how Leadspace and one or two others are really using AI to transform B2B marketing. So it's exciting times. It will be transformative. But it does require work and it does require time and it requires test and learn to get it better over time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today.
Great.
It's been a great conversation.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Cheers.